Good morning. So, today's Monday, the start of a new week, a new dawn, a new day. It's interesting. Only watched a few things on Sunday, and this morning, apparently for a lot of people, they've been coming to church, and their churches have been packed since what happened to Charlie Kirk, and I think it's really brought them forward to the idea of needing to repent, which is really good. I don't care which church it is, but as long as it helps people come closer to Jesus Christ, that's good. In my ward, it was pretty much the same. And I know that the talks alluded to things, mainly to take it on. And I taught elders quorum. I tried to do it head on. I, of course, didn't want to be overly political. I wanted to be more religious than anything, and specifically focused on having faith and hope so that we have trust and that we have hope in the resurrection so that we can give charity to everyone. And how that ties in with everything I've been reading, have it be a warning to us that we should stay up on the mountain, keep the Spirit with us. I hope it was useful. I really do. I wonder if it's affected more people outside the LDS community, or if there's people inside the LDS community that came back to church because of recent events. I wonder why there's what kind of a difference it would be. So maybe I'm just asking questions to the void, but that's the idea, is that I wonder how, obviously outside the LDS community or across the nation, there's a lot of people who are finally waking up to, we need to do what's right. Not just be tolerant, but do what's right. All right, well, now we're on to chapter 8, the Abrahamic pudding. All right. If ye were Abraham's child, ye would do the works of Abraham. That's John 8:39, kind of. All right, the TLDR. Abraham is arguably the most important religious figure in history, yet that didn't stop Joseph from revealing a book purportedly written by him. Not only are Joseph's revelation on Abraham in line with recently discovered apocryphal texts, but together they illuminate how Exodus, Leviticus, and the rest of the Old Testament were written in the shadow of the Great Flood. Joseph's gems illuminate why the Bible is the way it is. Grand Wizard of Atheism, Richard Dawkins, goes the world over mocking and denouncing the Bible despite the fact that he has never read it. There's 2 footnotes on this. First one calling him the Grand Wizard of Atheism. He says, that was kind of just poking fun. Dawkins is actually a devastatingly serious zoologist. He demands to be taken seriously. And his footnote for he never read any of it comes from Roe of 2012. So, yeah, that is interesting how critical he is, and he hasn't even read it. But relax. Dawkins assures us he's read some of it, saying, the Songs of Solomon is terrific, and my favorite book is Ecclesiastes. That's comforting. That's one step away from saying, of course I know the Bible. My favorite apostle is St. Gandalf the Grey, or I love the verses about the Trinity. This dude is the world's most prominent atheist? How do we let them get away with acting like experts on things they know nothing about? You don't ask atheists about the Bible like you don't ask Mormons about iced Frappuccino Pepes. Wait, iced Frappe Vente Chino Pepes, or whatever those things are. Like when the Daily Mail News wanted to know about the LDS temple garments, they called the same amateur porn star in America who left the church as a teenager and has never worn a garment in her life. Could one imagine a less knowledgeable person to call? If atheists cannot bother to read the Bible, then they certainly have never read the Book of Mormon, much less the Book of Abraham. But if some atheist was sincerely seeking to understand religion in the world, Abraham is precisely where they should go. Actually, if they wanted to understand baseline humanity, they should study Abraham. Abraham is the most influential person in human history. Footnote for that, Jesus is the most influential in the last 2,000 years, easily. But history has had a long history before that. That's a good point. Professor Ronald Hendels declares Abraham is the father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. As of 2024, more than 57% of the human race belongs to a religion he helped found. Second place is Hinduism at 15%, then Buddhism at just 6%. That means 4.4 billion people look to the legacy of Abraham for the religious identity, either directly or indirectly. See Share of Global Population Affiliated with Major Religion Groups in 2022, published by Einar H. Dybvik on Statistia.com, October 13th, 2023, and accessed on April 27th, 2025. So that's how recent that is. He has been called the father of monotheism, a man of perfect faith. There's Isaiah 41:8. See also the Testament of Abraham, and the friend of God. The Jewish Encyclopedia says that when God said, "Let there be light," he had Abraham in view. That was Mendelssohn, 2002. So much has been written about Abraham that Noah's Ark couldn't contain all the books. Yet Abraham himself never wrote anything. Oh, really? But see below. Everything we know about him was passed down through oral tradition or written down later in the Bible, presumably by Moses, the most influential person in human history, and all we have are second-hand writings about him. This is a pity because Abraham is actually the central figure in some weird stories like chasing birds away, see Genesis 15:11. The destruction of, I've heard it wasn't chasing birds away, it was sacrificing them and laying them out in a pathway of death, but I'll see what he means by that. Wait a minute. When he says chasing birds away, he says Genesis 15:11. I can figure out if it's the same story I'm thinking of. Just a moment here. Sorry, extracurricular on the extracurricular. Okay, let's go to library. Let's go to Old Testament, Genesis 15 and verse 11. When the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abraham drove them away. Oh, okay. So he did this sacrifice and he laid out these animals, having been quartered apparently in this path, and then he drove birds away. I wonder why he's mentioning that. We'll see. So chasing birds away. Sorry. Gotten my back to school cold finally. Took me a long time compared to everyone else. All right. So, like chasing birds away, the destruction of the cities of the plain, and Lot's wife getting super salty about it. The most famous story of Abraham's life is the prank in which God commands Abraham to kill his son, then psychs him out at the last minute. But through none of these stories do we ever get Abraham's own perspective. If Cain is unjustly cursed, Abraham is randomly blessed, seemingly out of nowhere, and the Lord chooses Abraham as the teacher's pet. Abraham is born, and a few verses later, he's given the greatest promises contained in the traditional canon, Genesis 11:27 and Genesis 12. The only thing more amazing than how influential Abraham became is how unjustified it all seems. So in 1835, when Joseph Smith Jr. claimed to have received an original Book of Abraham written by Abraham himself, he was stepping on the tail of the largest tiger in the scriptural jungle. there isn't a larger target Joseph could go after. If this was a fraud, this was the most brazen fraud ever fraudulated. So much has been written on Abraham that weaving a narrative without stepping on a contradictory landmine is quite a feat. It's easy to write the apocryphal Acts of St. Shnabadu if no one has ever heard of Shnabadu. But write about Abraham and you'll have every rabbi, imam, and preacher on the planet scrutinizing every word. The other problem I was thinking is it's short enough that they might actually read it. The world that didn't have opinions on what Lehi really said or where Amalek really lived, there was no risk in contradicting the record of Nephites because there was no record of the Nephites. Abraham, on the other hand, is revered by most of the planet. To pretend to reveal new information on Abraham is like pogo sticking through a minefield while holding a paper sack filled with angry cats covered in grease. But Joseph hopped right along all the same. Somehow the critics never pounced. In fact, if there's any book critics avoid harder than the Book of Mormon, it's the Book of Abraham. Sure, they'll gladly talk about the provenance or the fate of the papyri or Egyptian funerary texts, but they'll never engage with the actual content of the book. That's what he means by this. And I think that's a huge distinction, because anti-Mormons and atheists love to go after the Book of Abraham, but do they do it for the content of the book? Take Wilford Woodruff's assessment of Joseph Smith Jr. before ever meeting the prophet. Woodruff just went and read the Revelations. There was no paywall. He didn't care if Joseph was peer-reviewed or not. He just read them. Imagine that. Woodruff later said, quote, "Before I saw Joseph, I said I did not care how old he was or how young he was. I did not care how he looked, whether his hair was long or short. The man that advanced that revelation was a prophet of God. I knew it for myself." Wilford Woodruff Papers, Discourse 189-08-10. But what if Joseph had been a treasure digger, or had an accent, or had warts? This would be like attending a 5-star restaurant and ordering pudding for dessert. When you tell the waiter that you'd like the pudding, he regretfully informs you that the pudding chef is just 24 years old. The table next to you perks up, and the concerned patrons lean over and whisper that the pudding chef didn't study in Paris, don't you know? And finally, the manager emerges and warns you that the pudding chef has been known to wear Crocs with socks. One might be tempted to believe these claims at face value. Just 24 years old, and they put him in charge of the pudding at a 5-star restaurant? Did he lie about his age? And where does one study if not in Paris? He thought of him wearing Crocs and is deeply concerning. The thought of him wearing Crocs is deeply concerning. Others might go to investigate these claims. Is the waiter lying? Perhaps out of envy or spite? Perhaps the gossipy diners are all Frenchmen who disdain for any chef that trained in Rome or something. Maybe you can peek through the doorway and catch a glimpse to guess the chef's age, for some even go so far as to search the chef's Facebook page, searching for the candid photographs of his footwear. What a wise person would retort, "What the heck does this have to do with the pudding? I'm not trying to marry the guy, or hire him, or ask fashion advice. I just want to try the pudding." The diners and waiters and doctors and lawyers cry out, "But the pudding cannot possibly be good, you see. No 24-year-old untrained crock-wearing chef could possibly make good pudding." Don't listen to them. Try the pudding. After all, the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. Thus, it is with the Book of Abraham. Like I said, I'm sorry. Thankfully, it doesn't make me sound terrible. Critics have spilled so much ink trying to impugn the provenance of the Book of Abraham that with all that time, they very well could have swum across the ocean, walked through the desert, and dug up every inch of Canaan with their bare hands. Perhaps in the interest of time and effort, they might just have read the content. It's the ultimate judge a book by its cover rush to dismissal, and it is undone once a person opens the actual text. The book isn't that long, running about 4,800 words, which is shorter than the book of Esther. The book of Abraham is just 5 chapters, and only 2 of those are narrative. It abruptly cuts off in the middle of a vision and remains incomplete. The first, there's a big footnote on this. Let me see about this. It remains incomplete. Guy, page 18. Pieces of Abraham are evidently missing from what has survived to us. Joseph describes in his journal, 1835 to 36, that he explained to Brigham Young the Egyptian records, including many things in them concerning the detailings of God with the ancients and the information of the planetary system. As no revelation existed at that time, Joseph made that statement. As no revelation existed at the time, Joseph made that statement. Professor John Guy interprets this to mean that Joseph had gone further than what we have now. So that's what he means by saying that it remains incomplete. The first 2 chapters simply retell Abraham's wandering from Ur to Canaan to Egypt. The 3rd chapter is a vision, and the last 2 are a retelling of the creation story. It can be read in a single sitting. Yet, like Joseph's revelation on Adam and Enoch, this book of Abraham contains a treasure trove of secrets. It differs from the Bible in crucial and unexpected ways. Revealed in 1835, the book of Abraham is now challenged by recently discovered apocryphal texts covering the biblical Abraham, like the Testament of Abraham, published in 1973. The Apocalypse of Abraham from Old Slavonic, which was the first, published in 1898, and a mountain of traditions handed down from rabbis and imams linked back to antiquity. Surely these texts and traditions will provide a thorough test of Joseph Smith Jr.'s alleged seership. Even some of Joseph's friends reject Abraham. The Church of Jesus Christ, also known as the Cutlerites, maintains a firm faith in the Book of Mormon. Oh, really? The Church of Jesus Christ, known as the Cutlerites. The Cutlerites. I didn't know that was an actual different sect. Maintain a firm faith in the Book of Mormon, but reject the Book of Abraham. The inspired version of the Scriptures, or JST, which was never published by Joseph, is considered scripture to the Cutlerites, but Abraham is not. The Church of Christ, Temple Lot, also reads the Book of Mormon, but rejects the Book of Abraham. The Community of Christ, RLDS, doesn't have time for Abraham either. There aren't many of them. But of the handful of significant break-offs from the restored church, none of them accept the Book of Abraham. Everyone hates the chef, and no one tries the pudding. Well, we're going to bib up and dig in. I didn't know that there was a sect that just went by the Church of Jesus Christ. Well, sorry, this makes a significant difference to me because I like to call the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints just the Church of Jesus Christ, and the reason why is because to me, it's the Church of Jesus Christ, yes, in the latter days at this point, but I always think of it as a cohesive whole throughout time. Maybe I'll just have to do the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, of Middle-day Saints, and Early-day Saints. That'll be fun. All right. Canaan, Cain Jr. First, Abraham's nemesis. Once upon a King James version, Noah was celebrating not drowning with some bubbly, and things got a bit crazy. The next thing you know, Noah's lying naked on the floor. Noah's eldest son, Ham, spots the nakedness of his father, while Shem and Japheth, his younger sons, cover Noah back up. As a result, Noah wakes up and curses Ham's son, Canaan. What in the great googly moogly is going on here? Sounds more like the author of Genesis was the one getting tipsy. How can we make sense of this story? Sadly, the inspired version by Joseph Smith Jr. drops off here just before the flood hits. Joseph's narrative pares back and only offers sparse changes to the traditional canon. But we'll see that Joseph inadvertently echoes this story without even knowing it. The book of Jasher comes to our rescue, however, explaining that Ham was meddling with the sacred covering of Adam. Note that I said covering of Adam. Quote, "For after the death of Adam and his wife, the garments were given to Enoch, the son of Jared, and when Enoch was taken up to God, he gave them to Methuselah his son. And after the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the ark. And in their going out, Ham stole those garments from Noah his father, and he took them and hid them from his brothers." Jasher 7:25 through 27. Casual readers might not realize how sacred these vestments are, but thanks to Joseph's revelations and the Apocrypha, we know these to be the garments of skin which are made for Adam and his wife, the paradisical covering sewn by Jehovah's hand. These are a very big deal. That's the kind of thing Ham would be interested in having. Jasher says Ham gave his firstborn son the garments in secret. Jasher 7:28. Which is perhaps why Noah's ire is directed toward Ham's progeny, not Ham himself. The Apocrypha get us from Noah was drunk and naked, and Ham snickered at him, and Noah woke up and belched and cursed his own grandson. 2, Ham stole the most sacred relic of the family for himself and gave it to his line. Perhaps Ham thought these were his birthright, kind of like Cain tried to pull rank on Abel. But where did Ham get off thinking he had a right to Noah's garments? Here's another place where Joseph's inspired version comes to the rescue. Joseph inserted a tiny change in this story that helps untangle things. Joseph's version. And Noah was 450 years old and begat Japheth, and 42 years afterwards he begat Shem, of her who was the mother of Japheth. And when he was 500 years old, he begat Ham. Joseph Smith Genesis 785. Whereas the regular Genesis, and Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis 5:32. Why would the text say Shem, of her who was the mother of Japheth, but not say that about Ham? The implication is that Ham is a stepbrother to Shem and Japheth. Even if Ham was the youngest son of Noah, he could have been the eldest son of his own mother. This is starting to sound like Isaac and Ishmael, the sons of Israel, where step-siblings make disputing claims to the inheritance, and things get messy. Whatever Ham's justification was, he stole the garment of Adam. Still, Genesis needs more help, and Noah awoke from his wine and knew that his younger son had done unto him. And he said, "Cursed be Canaan." Joseph reveals why Ham's crime was so egregious. But why would Noah curse Canaan? Canaan was Ham's third son. The text never implicate him in this theft. Ham stole it. Cush kept it. Why should Canaan get cursed? Xiao Chong of the Fellowship of the Christian Reformed Church in Toronto, Ontario asks, quote, "Why was the curse pronounced on Canaan in the first place, when his father Ham was the guilty party, and why single out Canaan among Ham's 4 sons?" It is a good question, which he follows with an awful answer. It was a flawed human being, a drunken Noah, who pronounced the curse, not God. While the Bible is vulnerable to this cynicism, Joseph isn't done solving this yet. The first clue comes from the Book of Mormon, which just casually drops this hint in speaking of the evil combinations of the Jaredites. Moroni writes, quote, "And Achish did administer unto them the oaths which were given them of old, who also sought power," I'm adding that emphasis, which had been handed down even from Cain, who was a murderer from the beginning. And it came to pass they formed a secret combination, even as they of old, which combination is the most abominable and wicked above all in the sight of God. Ether 8:15 through 18. Joseph is claiming that the wicked abominations of the antediluvians survived? How is that possible? Everyone and everything was drowned. The Lord wouldn't bring evil records or compromised agents on board the ark. How could the abominations of the sons of Cain possibly survive? The Bible doesn't corroborate any of this either. There's no talk of antediluvian secrets somehow surviving the Great Flood. This must be Joseph making up fan fiction again. However, the apocryphal book of Jubilees backs up the book of Ether and Joseph's claim. Jubilees gives us a confusing nugget in the story of Canaan, written Kainam in the book of Jubilees, or whatever he was talking about, Jubilees. There's a footnote here. The Ethiopic manuscripts, the name ends with an M, while the Syriac ends with an N, while Wintermute's translation of Jubilees contained in Charlesworth Pseudographia. Interesting. So he's basically saying when there's Canaan, the way we're used to it, Canaan, and in this one it's Kainam. And so, yeah, interesting. The grandson of Shem. All right. Jubilees says Canaan was the grandson of Shem, while both Genesis and Jasher, which cover the exact same genealogy, do not mention this Canaan. Every other record says there is one Canaan, but Jubilees all of a sudden comes up with another. Dr. Todd R. Hannikin proposes this change was made by the author of Jubilees in order to help differentiate the Hebrews from all other nations. The Hebrews were the children of Eber, who would have been this Canaan's nephew. By putting curses on the other children of Shem, the Hebrews stand out as apart from all other nations and maintain a special status. So the scribe of Jubilees took the story of Ham's cursed Canaan and placed it on this fictitious second Canaan. Well, why do we care? Because this mysterious second Canaan does something truly curse-worthy. Jubilees says, quote, Canaan found a writing which former generations had carved on the rock, and he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it, and sinned owing to it, for it contained the teachings of the watchers, in accordance with what they used to observe the omens of the sun and the moon and the stars in all the signs of heaven. Oh, crap. So they had the Book of Remembrance, and here was the forbidden knowledge, and he transcribed it. Oh, crap. The Kibra Nagast also points the finger at Canaan. And again, after the flood, the devil, our enemy, did not cease from his hostility against the children of Noah, but stirred up Canaan. The Book of the Beast says Canaan revived the arts of sin. Ah, crap. Not this again. Canaan brings back the secret combinations and blood oaths that kicked off the whole dumpster fire of the antediluvians. Come on, kid, we've been through this. It's like college students discovering socialism for the first time. Again. Canaan not only discovered and read this stuff, but transcribed it and sinned owing to it. God. Meaning he brought this stuff back again. He started putting it into practice. The Book of the Cave of Treasures says that when youth grew up and attained the full measure of his understanding, Satan entered into him and became to him a teacher of sin. And also that Canaan reviewed the work of the house of Cain, the murderer. This is why Noah cursed Canaan, because the work of error through which the fall of the children of Seth had taken place was renewed. Stealing Adam's garment was bad, but it had nothing to do with Canaan's curse. Abomination nation. without a with a let me start that again. With a foundational understanding of the sons of Seth, we can recognize the things that Canaan renewed. The sins of his descendants, the Canaanites, began to look very familiar. For instance, in Leviticus, the Lord forbids the Israelites from doings in the land of Canaan. He then rattles off an eye-watering list of sins that show how well Canaan preserved the abominations of the Watchers. Sins of the Watchers. I'm just going to go straight down this column, and then the Canaanite sins and commandments to Israel. Oh, actually, they go well together. The sins of the Watchers are just what it is, and the Canaanite sins and commandments to Israel are on the right. So I'll just read them straight. You know which column's which column. Sins of the Watcher, sexual slavery. See Leviticus 19:20. Adultery. See Leviticus 20:10. Incest. Leviticus 18:6. Homosexuality. Leviticus 18:22 and 20 through 20:13. Bestiality. Leviticus 18:23. Also chapter 20, 15 through 16. Wizardry or familiar spirits. Leviticus 26. Infanticide. Leviticus 20, 2 through 5. Cannibalism. Chapter 26, verses 27 through 29. Experimentation in fertility, Leviticus 20:18. Animal crossbreeding, Leviticus 20:25. Consumption of blood, Leviticus 17:10 through 12. Oh, God. I'm sorry. All of this makes so much more sense now, and especially when you put it in this. Anyway. Even Deuteronomy, a misbegotten infiltrator that doesn't belong in the Bible, see Barnes' other book. Even Deuteronomy records the Lord's warnings against sterilization and castration. That's Deuteronomy 23:1. How do people read Leviticus without understanding the Canaanites? And how do readers make sense of the Canaanites without knowing about the Watchers? The conquest of Canaan is a direct reflection of the struggle with the Watchers. And this makes so much more sense, because this is another contention that atheists have about the Bible. They're like, oh, here God says completely and utterly destroy the Canaanites. And you call him a God of love? And it's like, well, let's see here. If he had to completely and utterly destroy the same exact things that was the utter destruction of humanity, yes. Yes, I think he would like to get rid of that. And what do you think is happening nowadays? How many people are going through population collapses because of a lot of the exact same things? Oh my quiche! Yeah, it's making a lot more sense now. Holy cow. When thou art come into the land, this is a quote, by the way. When thou art come into the land of which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter pass through the fire. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out before thee. Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 10 and 12. Whenever you read the word abomination in ancient scripture, you should think of the word child sacrifice. Joshua's reconnaissance team scouting Canaan comes back and reports precisely what you'd expect. Nephilim. Quote, we be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we, and they brought up an evil report of the land, which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature. And there we saw giants, Nephilim, the sons of Anak. There's a footnote to Anak. By sons of Anak, the text is referring to the Rephaim. The mysterious word Rephaim means dead or in Sheol. Sons of the dead, or sons that are in... and is used to refer to the Watchers who had just been wiped out and sent to Sheol. The word Rephaim appears 8 times in the Old Testament, each time referring to the deceased. So, like the dead antediluvians, the Canaanites are also aborters who bred and cannibalized their own children. Holy crap. That's from Numbers 13:33. Some scholars suppose this mention of the Nephilim is wholly separate from the Nephilim encountered in Genesis 6. But notice the mysterious provenance of these Nephilim. They are called the sons of Anak. Ooh. According to the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament, the sons of Anak, or Anakim, are linked to another mysterious group, the Rephaim. See Deuteronomy 2:11. Etymologically, Anakim could mean something like neck chain people. Neck chain people? Okay, he's going into scholars that are comparing Jewish words. Unfortunately, it's beyond me. I feel so stupid. People, so like neck chain people, while Rephaim shares a root with the word for shades or spirits of the dead. None of this makes sense to a reader bound by traditional canon, but when we consider the spirits of the Nephilim are bound in Sheol with eternal chains, it starts to make sense. The sons of Anak are the heirs of the antediluvian abominations. They are the mini Nephilim on this side of the flood. So 1,000 years later, here again we meet a second round of Nephilim, the mighty, fallen aborters. Notice that Joshua's scouts don't mention any women or children, but instead they say all the people that we saw in it are men. The only woman recorded in Canaan is an enslaved prostitute who coincidentally has no children. See Joshua 2:9-13. The prostitute Rahab pleads for the lives of her father and mother and her brothers and sisters, but never mentioned a husband nor children. Interesting. I don't know how coincidentally that is. I'll give it to him. He's right. He is right. But I wonder. Oh, I'll take that one a little more fun. I'll put a pinch of salt in that one. But that is very interesting. It is just one of those little, let's turn this stone over and, yeah, that's interesting. But that's it. Is it enough to convince me? Almost. Not quite. Not quite in this case. But that is really interesting. It'll mull around in my mind a bit. This certainly changes the narrative of the Israelites slaughtering the Canaanites, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. And it also, in a funny way, this is going to sound absolutely horrific, depending on if you are someone who is completely against history. But I was sitting here thinking about when, conquering in different times of, whenever there was conquering that was done in different times of history. Let's say the colonization efforts of the Europeans across the world. So that means Portugal, Dutch, Spain, England, France, Germany, all these European nations colonizing the world. That's obviously a rough spot that lots of people are very sore about. Yet at the same time, when I sit there and think about how when they found the Aztec, they were doing child sacrifice. There was literally entire mounds of skulls of the people that they sacrificed. You had a bunch of places that have had cannibalism. And there are still places that have cannibalism. And there were, for example, around the world in 80 days, there was a section where they have an indictment of the people of India who were still sacrificing the brides when the husbands died. And Phineas Fogg is against that strongly. And so, here are the wages of colonization. Stop human sacrifice. No, it wasn't all charms and roses and bringing Christianity to everybody. No, it wasn't. But at the same time, there were certain things that were definitely stopped because these were nations that were trying to follow Christ with what they had, and they were at least stopping some of these practices that you're just like, whoa, that's not good. So it makes me wonder that if there were a lot of regions that were conquered through this expansion of colonization that were meant to be taken over to help end this kind of stuff, even though they didn't know about it. So, crazy speculation on my part, but something that came to mind. Take for that what you will. Now, it makes more sense why the Lord ordered even the Canaanite animals to be killed. Oh my gosh, yes it does. Now it makes sense why Canaanite children are never mentioned. The Lord never says to kill children, just the residents of the land who had been steadily sterilizing themselves for centuries. Readers assume this includes children, but how many children live in a sterile society? So just when we thought we were done with the sterile, incestuous, murdering, blood-drinking cannibals, Noah's grandson brings them back again. Heck of a job, Canaan. At exactly the same time when Canaan rediscovers the secret of the Nephilim, God nips that particular wickedness in the bud by giving everyone shorter lifespans. Footnote to this, Jasher mentions both the generation of Canaan and the generation of Yoktan in the same few verses, 10 through 20, saying, "And the name of the second son Eber was Yoktan," meaning that in his day the lives of the sons of men were diminished and lessened. That will help limit the imagination of thought of their hearts. That comes from Moses 8:22. Of these Nephilim wannabes, still many of the darkest abominations of the Old Testament derive from this dude right here, Canaan, who rebooted the sins of the antediluvians. Canaan was cursed because he dared do this. Wow. So when Joseph Smith Jr. claims that the secret combinations of Cain somehow survived the Great Flood, he's right. Keep in mind that Joseph only had the Bible and didn't speak a lick of Hebrew, yet somehow these texts and insights all joined together later to support the claim made by Ether that the oaths which were given by them of old, and the secret combinations which are the most abominable and wicked above all, made it through the flood to Abraham's day. The bloody world of Abraham. Right in the same year. No, God, that just... all those things make so much more sense now. Dang it, now when I go through the Old Testament again, I'm going to have to see literally when they talk about Canaan and the land of Canaan, do they mention children? Wow. At exactly the same time when Canaan rediscovers the secrets of the Nephilim, Canaan was cursed because he dared to do this. So when Joseph Smith claims that the secret combinations of Cain survived the Great Flood, yep, made it through the bloody world of Abraham, that's where we're at. Right in the same year Noah died, Abraham was born. See Lectures on Faith 2:52. They didn't go fishing together on a grandpa trip or catch a BYU football game together. However, among Abraham's visions, one would not be surprised to see John Beck's pass to Johnny Hairline for the November 25th, 2006 game at Rice Eccles. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm sure he did. But it's important to note that the 10 generations of the patriarchs were crammed together, and the memory of the horrible days before the flood should have been fresh. Joseph's version claims that despite all these generations being chummy with each other, things went south very quickly. The book of Abraham begins by saying that Abraham's fathers were engaged in child sacrifice. Yeah, quote, "My fathers utterly refused to hearken to my voice. Therefore they turned their hearts to the sacrifice of the heathen, in offering up their children unto these dumb idols, and hearkened not unto my voice, but endeavored to take away my life by the hands of the priest of Elkanah." The priest of Elkanah was also the priest of Pharaoh, Abraham 1, 5 through 7. Joseph is shotgunning all kinds of claims out here before he was Abraham. Little Abram went through quite a lot. Abram's father embraced Egyptian idolatry. Abram's fathers were engaged in human sacrifice led by the priests of Pharaoh. Abram tried to talk them out of it. Abram's fathers determined to sacrifice him. To be clear, none of these claims are supported by Genesis. The Bible contains no stories of Abram's childhood, let alone some dramatic tale of Abram standing for truth and escaping martyrdom. Joseph must be making things up again. By Joseph's account, Abram tells us that his fathers had turned from their righteousness and from the holy commandments which the Lord their God had given unto them, unto the worshipping of the gods of the heathen. The Tolkovaya Pelea hints that Terah, T-E-R-A-H, Terah, was indulging in antediluvian abominations. As discussed above, the Nephilim were closely associated with the spirits of the dead and familiar spirits. God, okay, this just hit me. Again, spitballing here, totally crazy. Take it for what you will. I have no dog in this fight other than it just hit me. When they're talking about familiar spirits, they talked about in the Apocrypha the spirits of the antediluvians being chained into the low places of the earth. What if the familiar spirits are people who are trying to communicate to the Nephilim? Anyways, you could consider it that, or you could consider it the spirits who follow Satan, the third that were cast out. Wow, God, which makes me wonder about how many of the children of men were Nephilim from before the flood. Sorry. Crazy thoughts. But anyway. All right. Like I said, just throwing it out there. I am not taking any stock in that, but the Nephilim were closely associated with the spirits of the dead and familiar spirits. This might be what the Pelea is referring to when it says, "For Terah has given honor to the dead ones." All right, had things gone bad so quickly? The apocryphal Book of Jubilees describes Abraham's world as an echo of the antediluvian days, where men began to war on each other, to take captive and to slay each other, and to shed the blood of men on earth and to eat blood. Oh, jeez. And, okay, so I saw this, this reminds me of when he talks about to make war on each other and to take captive. There was a YouTube video talking about the origins of the Ten Commandments and how certain Hebrew sects have a different understanding of certain commandments. And one of them is of "thou shalt not steal," I think, is "thou shalt not kidnap" to them. Which, in this context, yeah, makes a lot more sense. So, interesting. And I wonder if that means that the whole Redeemer, the person who takes you out of captivity, concept of Jesus Christ is also more pertinent than we think. Like when you start, oh God, Joseph Smith was right. If you get the start right, the rest of it starts making a lot more sense. The apocryphal Book of Jubilees describes Abraham's world as an echo. So they began to war on each other, to take captive, to slay each other, to shed the blood of men on the earth and to eat blood, and to sell male and female slaves. Cough, cough. That's Jubilees 11:2. Andrew Sugarman of the Jewish Theological Seminary paints Abraham's life against a world engulfed in an inferno of chaos and evil. The beautiful creation of God was like a place in flames. See Heschel. Egyptian idolatry. Shoot. Sorry, this makes a lot more sense. I need to see how much further that we have in this chapter. Sorry, it's a work day, work week. Got to make sure that... Ooh, can I push it? I'm going to have to call it here, unfortunately. Because, yeah, holy cow. Okay. So, I'm starting to get the picture why these patriarchs are so important and why Abraham was so important. Because, okay, think of it this way. Canaan comes back, records from the Book of Remembrance the information about how the Watchers worked, the antediluvian sins. He brings them back, and that's part of the Tower of Babel, which is also a part of the Jaredite heritage, because they bring it with them as they come to what would eventually become the land of desolation here on the Americas. And it means that the child sacrifice, cannibalism, human sacrifice, and slave taking that was among different... Now, not all of the native tribes in America are the same. They just aren't. But it would explain how that stuff was here before the colonization of Europe. Because in the end, not only did it come through the Jaredites, but the Nephites that turned wicked, and the Lamanites would have had these same things. Although maybe to different degrees. I don't know. But I think it makes a lot more sense. I think when Abraham is called, the friend of God, when Shalem is the Prince of Peace, Shalem means peace, but when Melchizedek is a Prince of Peace, not only does this all have to do with being in the temple and being a covenant person who stays in the temple, it helps preserve the peace of the world. Oh my gosh. There is just so much that's so important, that having one truly righteous-seeking person trying to hold on in the middle of all this crap to keep the covenants of God completely. Wow. It is wow. I think it means a lot more. Yeah, and so when you have to have your son, having the covenants of the whole world would be blessed through thee, you'll be the father of many nations, that you have the majority of the world's religious people coming through Abraham because of his lineage, people who eschew the idea of these abominations. I don't know how completely... We're not perfect because we're children of children, and not all nations follow these anymore, like the Ten Commandments. But I think we're starting to get it again, hopefully. I certainly hope that people aren't just going to start raging having Satan rage in their hearts. I really hope not. Anyway, wow, it really puts a lot of things in perspective. It really makes all of the Old Testament make a lot more sense when you see that it's a fight against these abominations. And now it makes me frustrated and ashamed of the modern world, because here it's been snuck in again, frankly. Like, I remember kind of these ideas of, it's a good and important thing to have good and large families. And now it's not pushed as much in the church at all. There's not this, huge underpinning of, hey, these spirits in heaven are waiting for it to come down, and they want to be in a righteous family. There's a lot less of that. Now, it could be that, second coming is coming close, so maybe there's not that much time to emphasize it. At the same time, I just sit here and go, it's been important this whole time. And I think it should still be important. Oh, God. It's just so fascinating because we don't have Molech where we're passing children through the fire that are just born. We're not tossing them into the sea. But we are aborting children a lot as a global thing, and particularly in industrialized countries that can do it medically, safely. But don't worry, it's only in rare cases, right? And then we also have sterilization. We've had sterilization for a long time. We've had people sterilizing, if we go back to like Margaret Sanger and such, and the people who were quite racist, different groups of people based on their faith and ethnicities, that horror. And then you have the horror of modern day voluntary sterilization. Oh, just get your tubes tied. You're done having children? Just have your tubes tied. I've never thought of it as being something that's a remnant from the antediluvian days until now. I never thought of it that way. I never thought of how that would be such a hard and harsh thing and just be offensive to God, only because, like, you sit there and think, well, it's just some tradition from the old Catholic Church and you should just always have, no contraception whatsoever. Or it's between you and your wife and God, kind of. And that's true. It is between you, your wife, and God. But after reading all this, it's like, yeah, I think it's more important to understand that this is what happened in the past. This is why God suggests these things. And sure, if you're having a hard time and you can only have so many children and your body isn't helping you in any way, I get it. I truly do. At the same time, it's the same thing, like the difference between an ideal and what life is. Strive for the ideal. If the ideal is to have righteous families, and hopefully larger righteous families, to try and help each and every member of your family be righteous. And that's not going to be easy. I have only 3 kids, and that's already isn't easy, and that's not a big number. Compound that by having even larger families, 5, 6, 7 kids. How many of them get a twisted childhood only because there's a lot of things they will learn on their own because of the circumstances, or through their interactions with the brothers and the brothers and sisters haven't become fully engaged with the awareness that would be beautifully wonderful if you could provide it to all of them about the gospel and treating your siblings with love and respect instead of thumping in them because they piss you off or causing other pain. It's just, and that leads to them on the receiving of the thumping end doing weird and crazy things, or whatever. Every childhood is twisted by the experiences that you have, and it doesn't even have to be from the parents or from the siblings. It can be that they went to school and little Susie Q was rude to them and socially ostracized them, and so the daughters suddenly become hypersensitive to things because they've experienced a pain that they weren't prepared for, and so it warps their mindset because they found betrayal where they weren't expecting it, and it struck at them like a snake and has poisoned their life. There's just so many things that can go wrong in just anyone's life. And sometimes they just will not have the wherewithal to listen to what solutions are from people who know what solutions are. Anyway, the reason I go down this tangent is it has made me appreciate the idea of having larger families. A lot more respect to not only anyone who is trying to do it for righteousness' sake, and not, I know in some ways it pours on the fuel to the fire for the anti-Mormons who are like, oh yeah, you taught that you're supposed to have large families because there's all these spirits waiting, and it's just a way to like control you, and it's just a way to actually make you a sex slave. And it's like, oh really? Would you like to go the antediluvian route? Or would you like to be a part of a partnership that believes in this? That it's like, hey, this is part of the plan. You are part of God's plan. You are his children. You are his joy and his glory. And what is better than to be a part of that and have your own joy and glory in raising as many children as you are physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally able to do in good consciousness, to raise them righteously in the best ways that you can. It's not easy. It's not for everyone. But I think God really appreciates everyone who tries and will help them as long as they rely on him. God, there is so much that there's such a big difference. There's so many things that are so much more clear now. It's just, and the criticisms of anti-Mormons just smack of hypocrisy and manipulation and just horror. It's, sorry, I know I'm going on and on and on. I'll end it. But it's just so eye-opening, and I do hope you have a good day, and may God be with you.